Hi, I'm Michael Hall, coming to you live from KubeCon in Chicago, Illinois. I've got with me here Daniel Walsh. Daniel, tell us who you are, where you work, and what do you do?
So basically I work for Red Hat. I am a senior distinguished engineer at Red Hat, been there for about 22 years. Over the years I've worked on, well known for working on SE Linux, and later I built the Podman toolchain in containers. I've worked at containers for many, many years, all the way back to when Docker was just starting. So I've been involved very heavily.
From the beginning.
Yes.
Awesome. So what is Red Hat doing with ARM these days?
It's interesting because we're in my current job, I'm starting to work with what we call the edge, and I'm talking really the far edge. There's a new effort called RHEL for Edge, Red Hat Enterprise Linux for Edge. And one of the things we were looking at is how do we put enterprise Linux into things like moving vehicles, into automobiles, or into train stations, things like that. The interesting thing there is that most of that software, or most of the hardware that's going to be used, is going to be basically ARM as opposed to x86. And so there's interesting things that come up when we work, basic cross architectures that we haven't had to deal with in the past. And from the container point of view, in container world, you build for native architectures. So what we are working on now is to make it easier to build cross architectures on what we call multi-arch container images. So things like, some people call them Docker images, but I like to call them OCI images, or container registries. So we want to make it easier for people to build cross-platform so that they can test both in x86 and on ARM architectures.
All right, so I think that maybe leads me into my next question is, we're on day 2 now of KubeCon. What's been the most exciting thing for you so far?
Well, years ago I started work on, as I said, containers, and one of the efforts there was to build a container engine for Kubernetes. So we invested heavily in developing a container engine that was very stable and very locked to specific versions, and that's called Cryo, which I'm wearing the shirt right now, which is an effort by Red Hat, and they're announcing this week that Cryo is basically graduated. So it's a full-fledged product of the CNCF, the Cloud Native Foundation. So that's a very exciting thing for an effort that we started working on, 6-7 years ago.
Awesome. And people will be upset if I didn't ask you about Podman. So tell us what's going on there.
Yeah, so in Podman, again, I work on Podman, and really Podman has become incredibly successful. Podman is an alternative to Docker, if you know what it is, but it runs in a much more secure way. I think it's a better design because we eliminate the client-server nature and make it more basically standard Unix, like fork exec model. We can run rootless containers, but we're really working heavily to get it, again, towards the edge devices. So we're integrating it closely into systemd to allow you to have applications that start in the edge, not controlled by systemd, and some of the workflows that are going onto it. Secondary thing we've been doing with Podman is to get it to work really well with Kubernetes. So Docker sort of moved towards Docker Compose, and Podman supports Docker Compose, but we really believe that engineers building complex applications should be building directly for Kubernetes. So Podman can actually generate Kubernetes out of standard containers to generate Kubernetes YAML files. We can actually take Kubernetes YAML files out of Kubernetes and actually run them locally on a system with Podman command. Lastly, there's a new project we have called Podman Desktop, which is a desktop basically running a GUI on top of Macs and Windows, and as well as Linux, and allows you to generate containers on your desktop platform. But the really cool thing is when you're generating your containers or your pods on a Mac or a Windows box, you can actually push them directly into either locally running Kubernetes or actually Kubernetes in the cloud. So
that's nice.
It really makes it easy for developers to test their applications locally and then easily push them into Kubernetes.
So what are some of the challenges that developers face building multi-arch?
So yeah, the problem is the tooling up to this point has been fairly difficult to build multi-arch images. It ends up being like a 4-step process where you have to push images to container registries, and then you build what's called a manifest list. And anyways, it's been fairly complex. So what we're doing in Podman world is we're creating a new tool called Podman Farm. And what Podman can do is actually connect to remote Podmans. So if you were running Podman service on a VM somewhere, we can actually connect to it and actually trigger builds through that Podman service. So if you had, say, an x86 VM and a ARM VM, you could actually connect to both of those inside with Podman Farm and actually trigger image builds on them native to the architectures. And then what Podman Farm will do is reassemble those into a multi-arch image and allow you to pull. And going forward, people on some of the Apple hardware right now, which is running on ARM, actually does really nice emulation of x86. So if you're sitting on a Mac, you could actually run two VMs simultaneously, one in x86 mode and one in ARM mode, and you actually could do all this building locally.
That's nice.
Yeah. But even for people who are, say on Windows or on Linux boxes, if you had a cloud instance somewhere with basically of the particular architecture you want to build for, like an ARM system from an x86, you could actually do the same thing. So it's because it's all going over SSH connections. So it's a really nice feature to be able to assemble these. And I think in the future, especially as we go to edge devices, that this is going to be, ARM is becoming way more important for these systems.
Yeah, that's going to make it really nice in a heterogeneous environment, isn't it? All right. Well, thank you, Daniel, for coming on. Where can people find out more about Cryo?
So Cryo is www.cryo.io, and then Podman similar. There's a podman.io website, so you can find out about all the container engines that we work, and they're all under GitHub containers. So if you go to GitHub containers and want to contribute, we're always looking for contributors.
Fantastic. All right, Daniel Walsh from Red Hat. Thanks for stopping by.
Okay.